Truman's decision of dropping the bomb?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. I don't know why anybody would question it.
That's where I was able to shoot a guy, I think, at 800 yards.
800 yards?
Yeah.
It's a nice shot.
Nothing's good about war, believe me.
That's right. It's not.
It's nothing good about it at all. See, we landed right here in this area, and when we got off the...
What area? On this one here? Around
right,
the peninsula?
Yeah, and we got off the ship between Tinian and Saipan, and the Navy would fire one group around over that way, fire another group this way, and we landed behind the Marines at night. The front lines was about 100 yards in front of us. We tried to dig foxholes in the sand.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. The sand just crumbles in there. Then the next day we started down, and like he said, the Japanese did have, I guess, places where they knew the mortar rounds would land, and we went along a ridge and we were getting quite a few mortar fires. And then when we got further up the island, Magician Bay's over here, we're up there, we were on a ridge line. The Banzai attack went down through there, and that's where I was able to shoot a guy, I think, at 800 yards. We never got down to find the body, but
800 yards?
Yeah.
It's a nice shot.
Well, I
Got an M1?
had my M1, and every time I always picked up a pair of field glasses off of a dead motorman, so I had a pair of field glasses.
Right.
I was the radio operator. He had my M1, so I gave him the field glasses, leaned the M1 against the tree and got it in a notch, and started shooting. And I always fired tracers, so you could see the tracer go out for a ways, and then see the strike of the bullet. And there was no wind like there is now. It was absolute calm day. 6 clicks of elevation was my 200-yard range that I'd fired on the range. So we started there, and we worked it up to 28 clicks.
Wow.
And you could see the strike of the bullet on, and you couldn't dig a foxhole, so you dug what they call a slit trench, and then put some of the stone up around it. And I could see it hit on there, and the guy said, "You hit it on the thing." And finally, he said, "Fire around," and then the guy'd go down and come up. Finally, I fired around, and he said, "I think you got him." He never came up again. So I never could go down there, but I believe I got him.
The 2nd Division, which I was in as a company commander at the time, we landed on that side of this 200-yard long beach. After we landed, we had ladders that we could get over a steep part of the beach, a little bit further down. And that first night, the Japanese got through our lines and were lined up to attack our artillery, backing us up. And so I had to lead a good portion of our company after dark, which is murder, to protect the artillery. The next morning, we took off at just daybreak, skirmishers against the Japanese. None of them shoot at us. As we approached, they held a hand grenade up and killed themselves. Well over 100 did that. And they could have. Right here, where we are, right here, we're in Tinian.
Where you're standing, right?
Right where we're standing was probably, the artillery is right up, probably just on the high part right there. And then we came through right to this point. We came right to the point here, and very few casualties, but we saw a lot of the Japanese planes all wrecked. The Indianapolis brought the atomic bomb here, and then it was sunk by a submarine later on, further way south of here.
What do you think about being on this point right here where we are? This is where the bomb assembly happened that ended the Second World War. At the time, because you guys thought that you guys were going to go into Japan and have to invade Japan, right? So talk about what the bomb did, having it being dropped versus you going over to mainland Japan.
No, the proper perspective that our country should know is that if they hadn't have dropped those bombs on Japan, we would have lost a million or more of our own lives in the occupation of Japan landing. So we got to take that in mind, take that into account.
So a lot of my friends who were in the Second World War, they talk about dropping the bomb, and a lot of people say we shouldn't have done it. Some people said that absolutely, we should have done it. What's your take on that?
Well, we had to do it, otherwise the consequences of losing so many of our people landing there would have been horrendous. Not only that, a lot more Japanese would have been killed. Many, many more even than what actually happened.
So you think the lives that were lost on Hiroshima and Nagasaki?
There were a lot more lives lost if we had landed and had to advance through, see?
So you think Truman's decision of dropping the bomb?
Oh, absolutely, there's no question. I don't know why anybody even questioned it.
Harry Truman didn't drop it, I wouldn't be here. We were supposed to be on a decoy beach going into Sasebo, Nagasaki. And if they didn't drop the bomb, I wouldn't be here. So what it did, saved a lot of American lives. Millions of guys would have bid it right here.
These two monuments here, this is a mother mourning over the sons lost in the South Pacific. These monuments were raised by school children in Japan. This is a mother mourning children that were carried off of the cliff as they jumped off. I'm standing right on the top of Suicide Cliff that commemorates all of the civilians that jumped off of the cliff, carrying their children with them. So many, there were hundreds of civilians jumped off of here because they thought we would be cruel and we would torture them. They were told that by the Japanese soldiers.
Well, I know that the Japanese military were telling the civilians that
We torture them.
That the GIs were going to do what?
Going to torture them.
And what else?
Basically that. It was a bunch of baloney they were telling with enough to point that they were willing to just give up their lives. Some people.
Yeah.
Yeah, fed a bunch of garbage.
I watched women throw their babies off, and I saw women with their babies in their arms and jump off into that water and commit suicide because they were afraid of the Americans and they were afraid what the Americans were going to do to them. It's hard to even talk about it today. I don't like talking about it. I don't even like thinking about it. But it happened, and it's one of the consequences of war.
Now, that is Bonsai Cliff right over here. I was out here in '83 as a tour guide for Valor Tours, and there were 6 of us that were served together. And one of them, second lieutenant, he had a machine gun unit, and he got up here and he fired a machine gun at these guys, and they all jumped off over the cliff. But then when he gathered all this ordnance from up above, he blew it up down over the water came up almost worse them over the cliff, and it knocked off a lot more of the cliff itself. There are white birds there. They look like they're seagulls, but there were white birds flying all over the place. And the locals tell you that those birds were not there before the war, and that what's happening, they're the souls of the dead. That's that way they look at it.
Paul E. Ryan, captain. We became friends. He used to put me in a big sack and carry me around all the time. But we were good friends, even though he was a captain and I was a sergeant. He got killed going across the field and didn't make it. He was a great guy, proud to have known him and served him.
So it's kill or be killed, and it wasn't any fun, but we did win the war.